The early morning sun had yet to peek over the horizon as Tom Callaway emerged from his weathered fishing cabin at the small harbor in the Florida Keys. The salty air filled his lungs as he adjusted the brown fisherman's hat atop his graying head. His wrinkled hands, calloused from years of working the sea, pulled the worn yellow fisherman's coat tight around his body. The familiar weight of his fishing boots grounded him as he made his way down the creaking dock. Tom's eyes, slightly clouded with the beginnings of cataracts, swept over the gentle waves lapping at the shore. He had seen this view thousands of times over his 6.5 decades, yet it never failed to stir something deep within him. This was his world, his life, the sea and all its mysteries. With practiced ease, Tom loaded his gear onto his trusty boat, the Lucky Catch. The name, once bright and bold, had faded over the years, much like Tom himself, but both man and vessel remained sturdy, reliable, and ready for another day's work. As Tom settled behind the wheel and the helm, his fingers traced the familiar grooves and switches. The engine sputtered to life, a sound as comforting to Tom as a lullaby. Slowly, he guided the Lucky Catch away from the dock, the cool morning air caressing his weathered face. The sky began to lighten, painting the water in shades of lavender and gold. Tom's mind wandered as he steered towards his usual fishing spot about half a mile offshore. He thought about the countless trips he had made just like this one, the ebb and flow of the tides marking the passage of time in his life. However, just as he reached the halfway point, lost in his thoughts, he almost missed it. A fleeting flash of blue, there one moment and gone the next. He blinked, questioning whether his aging eyes were deceiving him. "What the—" he murmured, squinting through the cabin window. Tom's heart rate quickened. He was certain he had seen something move on his boat, something that shouldn't be there. Instinct, honed by years at sea, told him this was no illusion. With a mixture of curiosity and apprehension, Tom cut the engine, letting the Lucky Catch drift gently in the calm waters. Cautiously, he made his way out of the helm, his eyes scanning every inch of the deck. The boat creaked beneath his feet as he moved toward the fish hold, where he thought he had seen the movement. As he approached, a small sound, barely audible over the lapping waves, reached his ears. It sounded almost like a whimper. Tom's hand hesitated on the latch of the fish hold. Whatever or whoever was in there, he was about to find out. With a deep breath, he opened the hatch. There, huddled in the corner of the fish hold, was a little boy. Tom's eyes widened in disbelief. The child couldn't have been more than 6 years old, wearing a blue vest that looked like it belonged on a cruise ship rather than a humble fishing boat. Despite the nautical attire, the vest was dry. The boy hadn't come from the water. As Tom's mind raced with questions, he stood frozen, his weathered hand gripping the edge of the fish hold. The boy before him trembled, pressing himself into a corner as if trying to disappear into the wood itself. Their eyes met, wide and fearful, turning Tom's quiet fishing trip into something far more complicated. "Now, what in the world?" Tom muttered, more to himself than to the unexpected stowaway. He scratched his head, the rough texture of his fisherman's hat familiar beneath his fingers. This was far beyond his usual daily challenges of temperamental engines and elusive fish. Slowly, Tom approached the boy, his movements deliberate and careful. Years of battling unpredictable seas had taught him the value of caution in uncertain situations. As he drew closer, the boy's fear seemed to intensify. "Please, no hurt," the child pleaded in broken, accented English. His voice was barely above a whisper, thick with fear and something else, desperation, perhaps. Tom's usual gruff demeanor softened slightly at the boy's obvious distress. He wasn't used to dealing with children, let alone frightened foreign ones who mysteriously appeared on his boat. But somewhere deep inside, a long-buried instinct stirred, a memory of his own childhood fears and the comfort of a gentle word. Now, Tom said, his voice rough but not unkind. "I ain't gonna hurt you, boy, but you got some explaining to do." He crouched down, bringing himself closer to the child's eye level. "How'd you get on my boat and why?" The boy only shook his head, his eyes darting around as if searching for an escape route. Tom sighed, running a hand over his face. His mind drifted to stories he'd heard over the years. tales of refugee landings, of desperate people seeking a new life on these shores. The boy's accent and appearance certainly suggested he wasn't local. "Did someone send you here?" Tom asked, a note of suspicion creeping into his voice. "You trying to steal my catch?" The accusation seemed to break through the boy's fear. "No!" he cried, shaking his head vigorously. "No steal. No bad." Tom's eyes narrowed as he noticed something he had missed before, a small device strapped around the boy's ankle. It blinked with a faint red light. "What's that thing on your leg?" he asked, pointing to the device. The boy glanced down, his small hand moving to touch the device. "Swim thing," he said hesitantly, clearly struggling to find the right words. Tom frowned, his mind working through possibilities. Could the boy be part of some diving group? Had he gotten separated from his parents? "You lost your folks? Your group?" he asked. The boy nodded slowly, a flicker of hope crossing his face at Tom's apparent understanding. Tom exhaled heavily, feeling the weight of the situation settling on his shoulders. He gestured to his eyes, where the thin film of cataracts was visible. "Listen, boy, I'm just an old fisherman with poor eyesight. I can't be getting mixed up in whatever this is." He stood up, his knees creaking in protest. "I'm taking this boat back to the harbor," he declared. "When we get there, you're going to have to go. I can't keep you here. It'll only lead to trouble, and I'm too old for that nonsense." The boy's face fell, fear returning to his eyes. "Please," he begged. "I stay here? Please." But Tom had made up his mind. The idea of dealing with authorities, of being questioned and possibly even accused of something, was more than he wanted to handle. "No way," he said firmly. "It's back to the dock for you. That's the best I can do." Seeing the boy's crestfallen expression, Tom felt a twinge of guilt. "Look," he said, his voice softening slightly. "You can stay here in the fish hold if you want. Or, well, there's a cabin deck below. It's warmer down there." The boy shook his head, seemingly content to stay where he was. Tom nodded, accepting the decision. Without another word, he turned and made his way back to the helm, leaving the boy alone in the fish hold. As Tom started the engine once more, turning the lucky catch back toward the harbor, he couldn't shake the feeling that his simple life had just become far more complicated than he ever could have imagined. The gentle hum of the engine filled the air as Tom guided the lucky catch back toward the harbor, his weather hands gripping the wheel tightly, knuckles white with tension. The peaceful morning he had anticipated had vanished, replaced by a swirling storm of thoughts and worries. Tom's eyes, slightly unfocused due to his developing cataracts, stared ahead at the approaching shoreline. He exhaled deeply, the action triggering a sudden harsh cough that racked his body. The fit lasted for several moments, leaving him breathless and grimacing. "Damn it all," he muttered, frustration evident in his voice. His hand instinctively moved to his chest, feeling the uncomfortable rattle in his lungs. It was a sensation he'd become all too familiar with in recent years, a constant reminder of his mortality. As the coughing subsided, Tom found himself lost in thought, reflecting on the irony of his situation. "Born a fisherman's kid," he mused aloud, his voice barely audible over the engine's drone. "Raised up in the sea, getting old in the sea." He chuckled humorlessly. "There's too much of the damn sea in my lungs now. Bet I'll die in the sea, too, with all this salt in my chest." The harbor grew closer, its familiar sights both a comfort and a source of anxiety. Tom's mind raced with possibilities. What would happen when they docked? Would the boy run? Should he call the authorities? The weight of responsibility pressed down on him, as heavy as the humid Florida air. With practiced ease, Tom maneuvered the lucky catch into its usual spot at the dock. The boat bumped gently against the worn wooden pillars, a sound that usually signaled the end of a satisfying day's work. Today, however, it felt like the beginning of something far more complex. Cutting the engine, Tom took a moment to collect himself before heading back to the fish hold. He found the boy exactly where he had left him, huddled in the corner, eyes wide with apprehension. "All right, boy," Tom said, his voice gruff but not unkind. "We're back. Time for you to go." But as he reached out to help the child up, he was met with unexpected resistance. The boy clung desperately to the edge of the boat, shaking his head vigorously. "No, no," he pleaded, his voice thick with fear. Tom felt his patience wearing thin. This was supposed to be a simple solution: bring the boy back, send him on his way, and get on with his life. But nothing about this situation was turning out to be simple. Frustration mounting. Tom reached for his phone, his finger hovering over the emergency call button. "Look," he said sternly, "if you won't leave, I'll have to call the police. They'll sort this out." The moment the word police left his lips, the boy's demeanor changed dramatically. Tears welled up in his eyes, and he began to sob uncontrollably. "Please," he begged between gasps. "I'm scared. Please, please, please." Tom's finger froze above the phone screen. The boy's reaction was far more intense than he had expected, and it stirred something deep within him. Suddenly, unbidden, a memory surfaced, a recollection from his own childhood. He saw himself, young and small, sneaking onto his grandfather's boat, filled with a mixture of excitement and trepidation. He remembered the feeling of rough hands grabbing the back of his shirt, lifting him like a misbehaving puppy. He could almost hear his grandfather's gruff voice scolding him for his recklessness. The memory faded, leaving Tom with newfound perspective. He looked at the frightened boy before him, seeing not just a problem to be solved, but a child in need of help. Tom realized that he now stood where his grandfather once had, the older, wiser figure faced with a young, scared child. But Tom didn't want to be the harsh, unyielding man his grandfather had been. He wanted to be better, to handle this situation with more compassion than he had been shown all those years ago. With a heavy sigh, Tom lowered his phone and slipped it back into his pocket, convincing himself he needed to understand what frightened the boy before calling the police. The boy watched him warily, his sobs subsiding into soft hiccups. "All right, fine," Tom said, his voice softer now. "Let's figure this out." He moved closer, squinting to get a better look at the boy's face in the bright morning light. "What's your name, son?" The boy hesitated for a moment before answering in a small voice. "Miguel." Tom nodded, offering a small smile. "I'm Tom," he said. "Now, Miguel, can you tell me what you're so afraid of?" Miguel's eyes darted around nervously before he whispered, "I need to hide. Hide far away." Tom felt a chill run down his spine at the boy's words. Whatever Miguel was running from, it was clear that simply sending him on his way wasn't an option. Tom's mind raced, trying to come up with a plan. After a moment's thought, he reached for an old fishing net lying nearby in his boat. "How about this?" he suggested, holding up the net. "We can use this to hide you, just until we figure out what to do next, okay?" Miguel nodded hesitantly, allowing Tom to drape the net over him. As they prepared to leave the boat, Tom couldn't shake the feeling that he was stepping into something far bigger and more dangerous than he could have ever anticipated. But looking at the frightened boy beside him, he knew he couldn't turn back now. The walk from the Lucky Catch to Tom's fishing cabin felt longer than usual. Each step weighted with the gravity of their situation. Tom moved carefully, acutely aware of the small form hidden beneath the fishing net beside him. The familiar sights and sounds of the harbor, the creaking of boats, the calls of seagulls, the salty breeze, seemed somehow different now, as if the world had shifted on its axis. As they approached the cabin, Tom's eyes darted around, searching for any sign that they had been noticed. But the early morning hour worked in their favor. The harbor was still mostly deserted, save for a few early risers preparing their boats for the day ahead. Tom ushered Miguel inside quickly, closing the door behind them with a soft click. The interior of the cabin was dim, illuminated only by the pale morning light filtering through the small, salt-crusted windows. Tom fumbled for the light switch, and a moment later, the room was bathed in the harsh glow of a single bare bulb. "All right, you can come out now," Tom said, helping Miguel remove the fishing net. In the bright light of the cabin, Tom got his first clear look at the boy. Miguel was small for his age, his frame slight beneath the oversized life vest. His dark hair was tousled, and his eyes, though still wide with fear, held a glimmer of hope as he looked up at Tom. Tom made his way to the rickety table near his makeshift bed, where a pair of glasses lay among the clutter of fishing tackle and old newspapers. He rarely wore them out on the water. They were more of a hindrance than a help when dealing with sea spray and the constant motion of the boat. But now, as he slipped them on, the world came into sharper focus. Turning back to Miguel, Tom was struck by just how young and vulnerable the boy looked. He was wearing only the life vest and what appeared to be a diaper beneath it. The sight tugged at Tom's heart, reminding him of his own grandson at a younger age. "Let's get you into some proper clothes," Tom said, moving to an old wardrobe in the corner of the room. The sharp knock at the door sent a chill down Tom's spine. He exchanged a quick glance with Miguel, whose face had drained of color. The boy instinctively stepped back, gripping the edge of Tom's worn table as if it could anchor him in place. Tom's mind raced, heart pounding like the relentless tide against the docks. Another knock, harder this time. "Stay quiet," Tom whispered urgently, motioning for Miguel to move behind a makeshift partition near his cot. "Don't make a sound." Miguel nodded, his wide eyes full of fear. He disappeared behind the partition just as the knock turned into a heavy pound. Whoever was on the other side wasn't going away. Tom squared his shoulders, taking a deep breath before yanking the door open. He expected to see a fellow fisherman, maybe even harbor security, but the two men standing outside were neither. Their muscular frames strained against security guard uniforms that seemed a size too small, and their eyes were sharp, scanning the interior of the cabin behind Tom without invitation. "Morning," Tom said gruffly, leaning against the doorframe to block their view. "Something I can help you with?" The taller of the two men stepped forward, flashing a badge that didn't quite look right. "We're looking for a missing boy. Reports say he might have made his way into the harbor." His tone was clipped professional, but there was something off about it, something rehearsed. Tom's instincts, honed by years of reading the sea's mood, screamed at him to be careful. "A missing boy, huh? Can't say I've seen any kids around here. It's just me and my boat." The second man, shorter but stockier, studied Tom's face. "Mind if we take a look inside?" Tom forced a chuckle. "Ain't much to see but nets, tackle, and a whole lot of fish smell. Besides, last I checked, this was my property. You got a warrant?" The taller man's eyes darkened, his jaw tightening. "We're just trying to help, sir. If you got nothing to hide, there's no harm in letting us take a quick look." Tom folded his arms across his chest. "I know how these things work. Boys, no warrant, no entry. That's simple." For a moment, there was silence. The tension hung thick as a morning mist. Then, just when Tom thought they might push past him, the shorter man exhaled sharply, giving his partner a look. "Fine," the taller one muttered. "If you see anything unusual, you let us know." Tom gave a slow nod, keeping his stance firm as they turned and walked off. He waited until they had disappeared from sight before shutting the door and locking it. His fingers trembled slightly as he turned back toward the partition. "They're gone," he whispered. "For now." Miguel peeked out, his face pale. "They come back." Tom ran a hand through his graying hair. "Probably, and we can't be here when they do. We need to get you out of the harbor, fast." Tom wasted no time. He grabbed his duffel bag and tossed in a few essentials, his wallet, an extra set of clothes, and an old revolver he kept locked in his tackle box. He hadn't fired the thing in years, but it gave him some comfort knowing it was there. Next, he pulled out a heavy-duty fishing knife, sliding it into his belt. Miguel watched him warily. "Where we go?" "Somewhere safe," Tom said, shoving a few water bottles and a can of beans into the bag. "You trust me?" Miguel hesitated before nodding. "Yes." Tom felt something stir in his chest. This kid had no reason to trust him, an old, stubborn fisherman. But he did, and Tom wasn't going to let him down. With one last look around his small cabin, he nodded toward the back door. "Come on, we take the boat." The docks were quieter now, the early morning rush over. Tom kept Miguel close as they weaved between moored vessels, keeping their heads down. The salty breeze carried the distant hum of engines and the occasional call of a seagull. As they reached the Lucky Catch, Tom climbed aboard first, then helped Miguel up. He moved quickly, untying the ropes and starting the engine. It sputtered to life, the familiar rumble reassuring him. "Hold on," he murmured, pushing the throttle forward. The boat lurched away from the dock, cutting through the harbor waters. He didn't look back, but he knew they had only bought themselves a little time. Those men would realize soon enough that Tom had lied, and when they did, they'd come after him. The open water stretched before them, endless and deep. Tom adjusted their course, aiming for a narrow channel that led toward the mangroves, a place only experienced fishermen knew how to navigate properly. If he could lose their pursuers in the twisting waterways, they might have a chance. Miguel sat beside him, clutching the edge of the seat. "They find us." Tom clenched his jaw. "Not if I can help it." Minutes passed, then an hour. The sun climbed higher, warming the deck beneath their feet. Tom's pulse had just begun to settle when he heard it. The distant roar of an approaching engine. He cursed under his breath. "Damn, they're fast." Miguel stiffened. "What do we do?" Tom scanned the horizon. A sleek speedboat was cutting through the waves, heading straight for them. He had seen boats like that before, military grade, built for speed. There was no way the Lucky Catch could outrun it on open water. "Hold on tight, kid," Tom said, gripping the wheel. "We're going into the mangroves." He yanked the throttle back, steering sharply toward the dense network of trees and tangled roots rising from the shallows. The speedboat followed, closing the distance fast. Tom's breath came in short bursts. He needed to time this just right. The entrance to the channel was narrow, too narrow for a boat that size to follow at full speed. If he could just... A gunshot rang out, the sound splitting the air. Miguel yelped, ducking instinctively. The bullet splintered would near the stern, a clear warning shot. "Damn it!" Tom hissed, his grip tightening. The speedboat's engine roared, bearing down on them. Then, at the last second, Tom spun the wheel, steering the Lucky Catch into the narrow opening between the mangroves. The boat scraped against branches as they barreled forward, but fit, barely, behind them. The speedboat skidded to a stop, its passengers cursing. They couldn't follow without risking their hull. Tom exhaled sharply, adrenaline flooding his veins. "We bought ourselves some time." Miguel peered up cautiously. "Now what?" Tom scanned the tangled roots and narrow waterways ahead. "Now," he said, voice steady, "we disappear." As the speedboat circled outside, searching for another way in, Tom guided the Lucky Catch deeper into the mangroves, weaving through the labyrinth of trees. The dense foliage swallowed them whole, hiding them from view. For now, they were safe. But Tom knew the chase was far from over.
The dense canopy of the mangroves swallowed the Lucky Catch in its shadowy embrace. The hum of the boat's engine reverberated through the narrow waterway as Tom steered cautiously, weaving through the thick tangle of roots and low-hanging branches. Beads of sweat clung to his brow, both from the humid air and the weight of the chase that had brought them here. Behind him, Miguel huddled low, gripping the side of the boat with white-knuckled fingers. The boy's dark eyes were wide with fear, darting from the tangled trees to the water, as if expecting their pursuers to materialize at any moment. "They still out there." Miguel's voice was barely above a whisper, but the fear in it was palpable. Tom exhaled through his nose, stealing a glance over his shoulder. "For now, we got a head start, but they'll figure out a way in soon enough." The sound of an approaching engine echoed in the distance, sending a jolt of urgency through Tom's veins. He clenched the wheel tighter, scanning ahead for any route that could take them further off the radar. "Hold on, kid. Things are gonna get bumpy." With a practiced hand, he pushed the Lucky Catch forward, navigating through the winding maze of trees. The speedboat that had been tailing them was too large to maneuver easily in the tight spaces, but Tom knew it wouldn't be long before the men found another way to track them. Plan. As the boat slowed, Tom cut the engine, letting them drift deeper into the mangroves. The silence felt unnerving. Only the rhythmic chirp of insects and the occasional splash of a fish broke the quiet. It was a moment of reprieve, but Tom knew better than to think it would last. Miguel was the first to break the silence. "We can't run forever, right?" Tom sighed, rubbing a hand across his tired face. "No, we can't. We need a plan." The boy nodded, though his small frame was still trembling. "They won't stop looking for me." Tom's jaw tightened. "Then we make sure they don't find you." He rifled through his duffel bag, pulling out an old radio and switching it on. Static crackled through the speaker before he found the emergency channel. "This is Tom Callaway, out in the mangroves near Key West. I need immediate law enforcement assistance. Suspected human traffickers in pursuit. I got a minor with me. Repeat, we need assistance." The radio crackled with static before a voice cut through. "Copy that, Lucky Catch. We've got a patrol boat en route. 20 minutes. Can you hold your position?" Tom glanced at Miguel, then back at the water. 20 minutes might as well have been 20 years. "We'll do our best," he said before switching the radio off. The confrontation. The stillness didn't last. A rustling in the brush near the shore sent Tom's instincts into overdrive. He grabbed the fishing knife from his belt, rising to his feet just as a shadow emerged from the trees. One of the men from the speedboat stepped onto the exposed roots, scanning the water with sharp eyes. His expression darkened when he spotted the Lucky Catch. "There you are, old man," he sneered. "Hand over the boy, and this doesn't have to get messy." Tom positioned himself between the man and Miguel. "You're on my turf now. You so much as take a step forward, and you won't like what happens next." The man scoffed, but Tom didn't miss the flicker of hesitation in his eyes. He reached for his belt, pulling out a handgun. "I don't think you understand how this works," the man said, stepping closer. "You're outnumbered. You're outgunned. Just give us the kid and walk away." Miguel whimpered behind Tom, but the old fisherman didn't budge. His mind raced, searching for an advantage. Then an idea struck him. "You're right about one thing," Tom said slowly. "I am outnumbered. But you're making one big mistake." The man narrowed his eyes. "And what's that?" Tom's lips curled into a grim smile. "You forgot to check the tide." In that moment, the water surged forward with a powerful current, one that Tom had spent years learning to predict. The man's footing wobbled as the tide pulled at his boots, and in that split second of hesitation, Tom lunged. Using every ounce of strength left in his aging body, he tackled the man into the water. The gun went off, the shot echoing through the trees as both men went under. The rescue. Tom surfaced first, gasping for air. The smuggler flailed nearby, sputtering as the current dragged him further from shore. Miguel, eyes wide with terror, clutched the side of the boat. "Tom," he shouted. "I'm fine, kid. Get the radio. Call the patrol boat." Miguel scrambled to obey, his small hands fumbling with the radio. "Hello, police. The bad men, they're here. Hurry." The reply was swift. "We're 2 minutes out. Hold on." Meanwhile, the smuggler managed to grab onto a protruding root, pulling himself from the water, but his gun was gone, lost to the depths. He glared at Tom, seething with rage. "You're dead, old man." Tom, chest heaving, reached for the side of the boat and hauled himself back in. He turned to Miguel, grabbing an old flare gun from the emergency kit. "Get down, kid." The smuggler charged, but before he could reach them, Tom fired. The flare burst to life, a blinding streak of red arcing through the air. The man stopped in his tracks, shielding his face from the fiery light. Then, the distant roar of an approaching patrol boat filled the air. Blue and red lights flashed through the trees as officers stormed the shore. Within moments, the smuggler was tackled to the ground, cuffed and dragged away, cursing the whole way. Tom collapsed onto the deck, exhaustion washing over him. He felt Miguel's small hand on his shoulder. "We did it," the boy whispered. Tom managed a weary chuckle. "Damn right we did." The future. Hours later, as Tom sat in the harbor, wrapped in a blanket with a hot cup of coffee in his hands, a woman approached. Officer Mona Ilani. "Mr. Callaway," she said, sitting beside him. "We confirmed Miguel's story. The traffickers have been arrested. But there's something else you should know." Tom turned to her, brow furrowed. "Miguel's mother, she was involved. She tried to sell him to pay off a debt. He has no family left." Tom's heart ached as he glanced at the boy, now sleeping peacefully nearby. So what happens to him now? Mona hesitated. He'll go into the foster system. Unless. She met his gaze, and Tom understood what she was implying. He looked at Miguel, thinking of the long, empty years ahead of him. Then, without hesitation, he made his decision. I'll take him. Mona nodded. We'll start the paperwork. As the sun dipped below the horizon, Tom felt something he hadn't in a long time: purpose. The sea had taken many things from him, but today it had given him something back. Family.